Testing 1 2. 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 Testing 1 2.
Hello, hello. How are you? Good. Hello. You're near the door so you can get out. Is there coffee over there?
Is it any good? It's the same, right? When did the flight you were coming to get coffee?
Test number 2.
Okay. Charlie, we ready to go? All right, I'll call the meeting in order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Point of order that Director Herrick had given us advance notice that he wouldn't be able to attend the meeting today due to prior commitments, so he is given the due notification. I'll entertain, Director Trendick is outside, please have him return to the meeting. Tom, could you please tell Director Trendick to return to the meeting, please? I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I request a couple of amendments to the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, under new business, I would like to add a motion related to the 401K plan. And I had intended to add a motion regarding the White Horse boat launch, and I'd like to change that to a discussion topic.
All right, let's take the first item, the 401K matching. Any questions regarding that? All right, all those in favor of adding the 401K discussion as a motion to the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And the next item was a discussion on the White Horse boat ramp. White Horse Park boat ramp. Boat ramp.
I would second that.
All right, any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor of adding that to the meeting agenda, say aye.
Aye.
I also have amendments I'd like to recommend to the agenda. Under new business, I would like to suggest the board adds vacancy of the board position that was created as a result of Director Supik's resignation. I'll take them one at a time.
Is there a second?
That's discussion,
Yeah.
correct? I second it.
Okay, I had planned to cover that in my president's remarks, but if we feel that we need to continue to have that in the agenda, then we can add it, but,
And if
Yeah,
we
the
need it, we need it.
reason I wanted to include this in a board agenda is, with all due respect, your president remarks are different from the board's position on this topic. So I think it behooves
add
the
it as
board to have this
add it as a discussion
discussion.
item, thank you. Next?
Second amendment I'd like to recommend on the new business, vacancy of the treasurer position. Discussion.
I'll
Is there a second?
second that.
Any other questions? All right, add that as well.
And my,
You did get votes on that, I might point out to you.
Very good. My bad, thank you for reminding me. All those in favor of adding that to the agenda? Aye. Thank you.
and a third amendment I'd like to recommend is that the board removes Director Horn's motion to approve Resolution B08.
Is there a second to that? Seeing none, then that will not enter onto the agenda. Any other changes to the meeting agenda?
Yeah, just one last thing. On your treasurer's report, just change that to Steve Phillips, Finance Director, and that's it, just for record purposes.
So noted. Michelle, would you please take that under advisement to change that? Thank you.
I'd move to adopt the modified agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of accepting the meeting agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Move to the approval of the minutes from the May 24th regular meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept them as presented. Is there a second? Discussion. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes from the May 24th meeting as presented, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, President's remarks. First of all, as many of you I'm sure already know, Director Supik has tendered her resignation from the board and as treasurer of the association. I wanted to personally thank Director Supik for all of the work that she has done over the past couple of years, both as a board director and as the treasurer of the organization. I respect her decision, and hopefully we can continue on, and I know that we will. But again, I wanted to personally thank her for all her efforts. Regarding what we talked about before, we do need to elect a new treasurer. But my concern at this point was we're missing one of the directors, Tom Herrick, and I certainly want his input. Section 604 of our bylaws addresses the vacancies and for the officer position. So it's got to be done at the next regular board meeting according to that bylaw. I'm asking, and maybe it's good that we're bringing this up in discussion. I'm asking for consideration to have the discussion and the election of a new person for that position at a special meeting that we'll call just for that purpose, okay? And in the meantime, by the way, we have assistant treasurers. John Viola is assistant treasurer, Gene Ringsdorf is an assistant treasurer, and Steve Phillips is an assistant treasurer of the association. So with regard to handling financial matters in the interim, we're well covered. And obviously, the intent of having an assistant is to address these kinds of conditions if they happen to come up. I wanted to mention something regarding Comcast, because I know there were some open questions. We received a final proposal from Comcast, and their position was the only way they would bring services into Ocean Pines was if every resident signed up for bulk services, all right? That means you don't get a sense, you don't get a chance to say, no, I don't want your service. The services are priced at $65 per month. So the annual assessment increase would be $780. Based on that, I felt confident that that would not pass muster with the association, so I didn't ask for a specific response from them. I think we're fine. However, I will turn to my board colleagues and say if we want to officially, to memorialize the particular event, if we wanted to officially reject the proposal from Comcast based on what they gave us, I would certainly add that to the agenda today if you think it's warranted. Okay? All right. Yeah, with regard to, and then obviously the next item would be MediaCom. I know people were looking for an update on MediaCom. The attorneys have looked through, the OPA attorneys have looked through a draft comment, have made a review and recommendations that we're looking at and will take forward to the MediaCom attorneys. So that process is ongoing. MediaCom has said that as long as we are I don't want to say negotiating. As long as we are having an open discussion with them regarding the contract, they will honor a month to month, so we're not really in any danger of losing the contract per se. All right, so ongoing, and we will commit to making sure that all the information regarding the contract negotiations going forward with MediaCom will be made everybody aware of. And then the last thing on my item was the forensic audit. I know that there wasn't a lot of information. JB, I think did we post the information on the site? So yeah, I just wanted to direct everybody that the first status report from the forensic audit from Gross Mendelsohn has been posted on the website. It's very generic. It basically lists the things that they have done to date. They're not in a position to make any recommendations yet, but they have conducted their work and are continuing to conduct their work. So I think everybody should go out to the website, take a look at that, and get an idea of where we stand with the forensic audit. That's it for my remarks right now, so I'd like to move into the next item, and that would be the Treasurer's Report. Steve Phillips.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've just closed the first month of the fiscal year, and the result was $6.286 million in operating income. Of course, May is when we will produce the very large operating income number because of all the assessments that become fully recognized, coupled with the high level of membership activity that we start off the summer season with. Our $6.286 million compares to $5.269 million in last year that we received. The difference is $250,000 approximately in additional assessment revenue, and the remainder is $750,000 additional contribution that we made to the reserves last year in terms of bulkheads and the general capital replacement reserve. In terms of cash flow, May is the second highest cash flow month of the year, just second to April. We typically collect between $2.5 and $3 million of inflows from memberships as well as assessments. Our revenues were slightly down, about $30,000, but generally in line with our FY19 budget. So breaking down membership revenues specifically, you can see that we had $704,713 in membership revenues last year. This year we had $688,315. I broke it down in terms of the different areas. You can see that beach parking is actually up. That's driven by the parking only option that we added kind of at the last second of the budget. That was not adjusted in the budget numbers, so you can see the additional revenues that we're getting from that parking only revenue. The aquatics revenue is going the other way as a result of that parking only eating into the debit card as well as the photo ID cards that were purchased in the previous year by those same customers. Golf is slightly down, and you can see that the racket sports are all up slightly. A few highlights that I just wanted to mention. You can see our bad debt expense was favorable for the month. We did not have a lot of write-offs, so that's good news. We also were favorable in terms of wages and benefits by $7,603. Now, the The variance that we had of approximately $100,000 is driven by the maintenance as well as the service supplies lines being over. And this is pretty much due to the food and beverage startup costs as well as the additional maintenance and renovation costs that was approved in association with bringing our new management company on board for the new operations. So in terms of the food and beverage highlights, I just wanted to get into these a little more detail. We had a lot of one-time startup costs, specifically in the expense line items of training, uniforms. We had additional management labor associated with starting up the new business. We also had some general maintenance expenditures within our general maintenance department, which drove those numbers. But if you look at the revenues, we actually are $27,000 higher than we were last year, and that's non-banquet revenues. But we were only open 11 days in 2018. So, from a performance perspective, that's pretty impressive. In terms of looking at the numbers that I've seen thus far in June, the numbers continue to be rather impressive. I noticed that I did an analysis for Denise this week. We looked at Father's Day weekend. The numbers were doubling what we did in deposits for Father's Day weekend last year. So I feel like this is, from a expense standpoint, these cost ratios is going to be like this for May, but going forward we won't see the same cost ratios, and we will see the revenues continue to uptick. Okay, so I wanted to switch gears and talk about cash and our short-term investments. In May, we placed an additional $3.5 million of cash into CDARS. They're currently producing an average interest rate of 1.74%. And right now we have $2 million currently in transit to Union Bank after many, many, many steps of trying to get things established with setting up a money market account up there, getting all the signatures here, and then having to go into their CD Plus program, which was a separate process in itself. Now that we have that established, that check has been sent off to them. On the June statement, you will see the $2 million in the CD Plus program. We already, at this date right today, we have $250,000 in the money market at Union. That was the first step because that was required for that. We had that money market set up before we can invest in the CDs. So we'll have approximately $9 million invested in laddered CDs on the June cash statement that you see next month. And then next steps, we're looking to take advantage of some additional shorter-term CDs with some good rates that were offered to us by both Union and Bank of Ocean City. So we increased our blended rate by about 0.25% from April to May, and I expect that blended rate to continue to go up. And that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Yeah, questions for Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I have a question for you. Looking at the monthly financials for May, I believe that reported about approximately $6 million in money market with the Bank of Ocean City. Your report today, does that actually reflect what was conveyed to us with $6 million in money markets, earning 0.9%, or is?
Well, it's a combination. It's insured cash sweep / money market. The majority is an insured cash sweep, which, but yes, it is 0.9% is what
for
it.
$6 million. Okay.
Correct.
So what is our basically burn rate and our cash flow requirements, in the coming months that demand that we hold $6 million in cash in the sweep account?
Well, there are not. The problem was bringing that money over and putting it into Union that was approved by the board, the timing of that. So we don't have those cash flow requirements, but we're trying to move that over as quickly as possible.
So would you feel safe to say to the board that this is something that needs to be looked into this month, what we do with this cash to generate additional interest from this money? I mean, I'm
Right.
getting right now 1.9% from 4-week Treasury bills.
Right, and
That's
that's what I was.
1% more.
That's what I was trying to establish up there, that it is in process.
Okay.
So, I mean, all that money's being shipped over to Union Bank, and then I'm going to do short-term investments on top of that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to look at that and, give the board some heads up on that, because that would be, $6 million, 1% difference, that's $60,000 a year or about $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to just clarify a little bit. I got a breakdown of how long it takes to open up one of these CDARs or other things at the bank, and we approved this on 4/23, and I'll share with Director Trendick and anybody else they need it, but by the time you got done, we did everything on time. We just got that approved on, I think, 6/21 or 6/23. It took us almost 2 months. The other thing that has changed is there's something called a FinCEN that requires one of our officers to disclose their Social Security number, all of their information, which is a new regulation. The other thing with Union Bank, we actually dealt with 2 different departments. First, you had to open up a bank account there. Then when we got all that paperwork done, we said, okay, now we want to start CDARs, and they said, oh, by the way, that goes to a different department, and we basically started all over to get there. So if you read the actual timeline of what we did, we moved very quickly. So I agree with you, we need to go, but it's not like one of us walking in and saying we want to open a $10,000 CD. There is just, when you read this, you'll see what a pain it is, so.
Ted, I totally agree with you, but there are other ways to achieve the same goal, setting up basically account with Fidelity or directly with the Bureau of Public Debt. Treasury accounts can be set up by corporations, and they are anytime. So I think we need to look at for maybe more efficient ways of doing this. Thank you.
So, yeah, my comment, clearly we're heading in the right direction. We've got some opportunity to move cash to get a better rate of return. I think that that's a thing that that the board will charge you with that, but it's certainly something we would be very interested in seeing how well we can manage the liquidity of those kinds of things to ensure that we're getting the best rate of return. So please take that under advisement, and we can certainly move forward. Any other questions? Move on to the next item on the agenda, the General Manager's Report. Mr. Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, we'll talk about the reserve study a little bit. It's so important for everybody to get to that meeting. We pushed it back from yesterday, and the next date is set for Friday, July 13th at 9 a.m. in this room. I encourage anybody and everybody to be there. If you can't be there, it will be carried live, and then will be available on the website as well. I wanted to go over a few things. What does the reserve study do? What is it? It basically is the intent is to address our replacement capital needs of the association in a planned, programmed, strategic approach that will limit fluctuations in the annual assessment going forward. It includes a review of all of our capital assets. The full report is 357 pages long. It has all the departments. It also covers roads, bridges, and bulkheads. Also want to point out what it doesn't cover. It doesn't cover drainage. It doesn't cover any new capital requests. Those will be dealt with separately. But the decision points for the budget, this will be a joint meeting between the Budget and Finance Committee and the Board of Directors. An open meeting. There are several decision points for those two bodies to address. They'll discuss those things that day. It includes an interactive, we'll use that screen. Our reserve advisor will have a program up there on the screen where if we want to say, all right, well, what do we do if we want to fund the reserve fund at 20%? You can plug that number in, you can see the different changes in that bar graph. And so it's very fluid, dynamic type of meeting. Those decision points are at what percentage of full funding does the association want to fund the reserves? What percentage rate of inflation do we want to incorporate into the calculations? And I'll describe that one for just a second. If you buy a truck, and I'm going to use a amount that is easy math, I hope. Say you buy a truck for $10,000 and it's good for 10 years and you're going to replace it 10 years later. You're going to set aside $1,000 a year for 10 years. 10 years later, you're going to replace that truck. Is it going to cost you $10,000? No. So we need to factor some form of inflation into that factor so that when we get to that 10th year, we'll be able to replace that truck without adding cost to it. A third point, what amount do we want to maintain as a minimum balance threshold in the reserve fund? Should that minimum threshold stay the same, or should it adjust for inflation throughout the process of the years? 4, what, if any, annual percentage of escalation to the contribution amount do we want to incorporate into the calculation? We have a set amount that we contribute every year to the replacement capital reserve fund. Do we want that to stay the same, or does that amount do we need to escalate that in order to meet our needs? That's another number that we can plug into that dynamic format that DMA uses, and we can see those different changes. And then there will be the same considerations for the road reserve and the same considerations for the bulkhead reserve. As far as the timeline for that test, again, July 13th is the joint meeting of the Board of Directors and the Budget and Finance Committee. July 18th, I believe, is when the Budget and Finance Committee will meet and vote on reserve study recommendations, those questions that I just went through. They'll make those recommendations to the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors will make those decisions on July 27th. DMA will plug all that information in and produce the final reserve study report. And then what's next, right? We take that document and we utilize it to build our budget for 2019 and 20. And we also utilize it to develop the strategic plan that we've all been talking about and wanting for so long. So this is a critical piece to all these financial pieces that the association faces. So hopefully you can get to that meeting on July 13th. If you can't, follow it online, please. Next thing is the Drainage Working Group. We met a couple weeks ago, and we are working on it. We've developed an outline for that report. That report is due back to the board, self-imposed deadline of July board meeting. A few things from that outline. We start off with an introduction about what is the problem. We talk about environmental factors and community design, the high water table, the lots that are built on that couldn't be built today, design capacity of our existing system, and all the different, the math, the numbers, if you would. How many roadside ditches, how many, we've figured out we're over 350 miles of ditch lines within OPA. Average amount of rainfall, those types of things. Who is responsible and for what? That's an ongoing discussion right now, which we have all, a lot of us have been entertaining to discuss, because the documents are clear in one sense and not clear in another. But there are other things besides the documents that we have to deal with, and that's how do we address non-resident owners and rental properties and empty lots, and then the role of Worcester County in building and permitting. The different elements that we've discussed previously are emergency response, preventive maintenance, chronic that are non-engineering issues, chronic that requires engineering, and then we've got a whole big education element of the report. Then we break each one of those 5 elements down, and emergency response, dealing with rainstorms, what does the OPA staff do, what does the county do, what can the resident do to help, what doesn't get done, what impact do storms have on the rest of the program. Preventive maintenance, the chronic non-engineering examples of things that we can do without any need of engineering help, and then those things that require engineering. We've developed 3 different levels, level 1, 2, and 3, and we'll begin more on that when we produce that report. And then the education effort itself and how we want to proceed with that. And then I think most importantly from this report will come specific recommendations back to the board. Pilot projects, the education program, possible looking at enforcement and penalties, preventive maintenance, funding for staff. We're looking at 8 is what the group wants to ask for. Funding for equipment, service truck, GPS, tools. Another aspect is opening up the OPA yard for year-round operation, how that impacts helping everybody clean stuff out. Request for and funding of engineering services for all these different levels that require engineering. And then looking for county, state, and federal guidance and financial assistance. So there will be specific recommendations with specific amounts of money that will be presented, and then I will work to incorporate some of that into next year's budget. And then there'll be a support document section. Regarding the country club, we had 2 additional meetings after the special meeting of the board the other week. And there'll be more on that later as a part of the agenda, as you've seen. We did meet yesterday, excuse me, with the architect, DBF, and we went through a variety of add and delete options about a lot of little things. And then we specifically spoke about the elevator and the inclusion of the elevator, so we'll work on plans to include that, as well as looking at roof and roof line issues. There's a practical aspect of preventing leaks and fixing the things that do occur now. And then there's the other aspect of how far do we want to go with dealing with the aesthetics of that building's exterior with the siding and all those cut lines, if you would, of the roof. We'll talk more about that later as a part of the board meeting itself. Regarding amenities and programs, I wanted to touch on a few things, following up what Director of Finance Phillips was sharing with you earlier in the Treasurer's report. June's looking very strong. Case in point, last weekend, Yacht Club revenue was up $25,973 over last year for the same weekend. Beach Club was up $4,803 over last year, same weekend. We're also getting some deposits in for weddings. That's a good thing. And obviously, please pray for better weather, particularly Friday. We do fine business-wise Monday through Thursday, but if we could have some sunshine on Friday and Saturday, that'd certainly help. Tiki Bar was closed last night. Band couldn't play. So get out there and pray this afternoon that we have some sunshine. The marina is doing significantly well as well. The concerts in the park have started, and if you haven't had a chance to go to one of those, I had never been to one before until the other night. So we have, those are Thursdays, and then on the back of that is the movies. And so those things are getting going. We have the summer camp started. So if you're up here during the daytime, you'll see a lot of youngsters running around, doing a lot of things inside this building and outside. One caution, obviously it's summertime. Be mindful of all the youngsters and their parents and grandparents getting them to and from buildings, particularly around here, probably what time, 4 o'clock? Between 4:30 and 5. And we're trying to work out some a little better organized parking for pickup and that type of thing. So keep that in mind as you're around this area. Golf was even for the month of May. That's inclusive of Turn Grill. They were right on the spot. So that's a very good indication of things, even with all the rain. So that was great. I mentioned to the board getting into Memorial Day weekend last month that I was anxious to get to this point in time so I could see everything, full-blown operations, and really do some more of these operational audits while we're actually doing things. The 50th anniversary golf tournament is this coming weekend, next Saturday this time. Obviously, we have July 4th, and then July 22nd is the Beach Bash for the 50th anniversary. So get out there and enjoy your community. Thank you.
Any questions for JB? JB, thank you.
Yeah, I got one
Oh,
quick.
sorry, Ted, go ahead.
JB, can you, with the drainage working group, have them look as to whether they think we should be including in reserves the cost of the actual physical culvert work under driveways and some of that stuff, which I think Director Trendick had talked about before, but is not in that reserve right now.
We will make that a recommendation, yes.
Okay.
Whether it's in the Roads and Bridges Reserve, probably a good place to put it. Nothing in there for those things now. It just covers paving and the 4 bridges. It does not include any of the pipes, what was it? Last Friday, Friday before last, we had a sinkhole on the entryway into Mumford's Landing, which leads where? To the yacht club. Can't ever happen on Tuesdays at noon or something. It has to happen on Fridays at 4. So anyway, I was the first one to get there, and I was directed traffic around the sinkhole. But that was caused because the culvert pipe underneath there that connects the canal on each side has been failing. It failed a year or two ago on the other side, on the exit side, and now it's failed on the other side. So, but that pipe, and the pipes actually don't cost a whole lot, but it's the labor and all the work to get them in cost, and that's not. I think we have $60,000 in the budget for pipes and drainage work. Obviously, that's not anywhere near what we need that to be. So I think we'll take that into advisement.
All right. Thank you, JB. Next item on the agenda, public comments. Just a reminder, please state your name and your address. Floor is open. Sir.
My name's Rich Kleiner. I'm at 516 Ocean Parkway. I've been a resident of Ocean Pines for 16 years, and I do a lot of crabbing. And this issue has to do with the amenity which attracted me here of the crab dock and of the possibilities of the crab dock being relocated to another location. I've worked for Ocean Pines for the past 5 years, and I've been crabbing throughout Ocean Pines for the full 16 years. I've tried different spots, different locations, and I can tell you right now that the location of the crab dock as it is now is probably the best location in Ocean Pines. I've been behind the water treatment plant. I've been on the bridge. I've been at the 300 block. And I've tried all those spots without going on private property. And the crab dock cannot compete. I mean, it just blows them all away. I've met a lot of people on that crab dock. I've met 100 people probably over the years. Since I've been going there, I've never seen less than 3 cars parked on the outside on the road at that crab location. The majority of people that come down to the dock are either walking or riding a bike, and that's telling me that the people who live in that general area, in that location, are the ones that use that dock. I have some numbers for you. Being that the dock is closed, I looked into buying some crabs. And the crabs to go per dozen for the large is $80. Watermints for a dozen is $84. The crab bag in Ocean City is $99. I can take a $5 bill, go to Food Lion, buy crabs, bait, chicken backs, go to the crab dock, and walk out of there with 3 dozen or 4 dozen. So the idea of moving that dock to another location, I think, is something that you need to reconsider and take a look at it. It's an amenity, which brings me to the home association fee. Now, I was under the understanding that the home association fee partly finances the amenities throughout Ocean Pines. Keeps the pools working, keeps the yacht club going, keeps the country club going, keeps the golf going. I don't understand why there has been no maintenance done to this crab dock over the years, where it's reached an actual point now where the condition of the dock area is reaching a point where it may have to be replaced. I mean, that crab dock should have been maintained yearly. You should go in there just like they do the boardwalk. They go in and they replace planks when they're worn, and they keep things running. I went down to the crab dock myself, and I did an inspection. I saw one floating device that was out of alignment. I saw 2 planks, which looks like someone has gone down there and actually used a crowbar and popped those planks up, so it could be declared unsafe for use. Now, other than that, the dock looked the same as it did last year and the year before and the year before that. So what I would like to do is give you some recommendations. Number one, I feel the way to go with this is to fix the dock which is in place. It's a beautiful dock. It's used for more than just crabbing. People come down and crab. People come down and fish. You can fish there. People come down to take photographs because it's a beautiful location. I've seen people come down and harvest the mussels to take home and put in a nice red sauce or white sauce or whatever. So the dock should be repaired. And then the question about the parking, like I said, I've been going down there for 16 years, and I think I saw once where there was 3 cars along that road. But if you push back on that tree line, you could put a little pull-in parking lot, and you could easily put in 10 spaces for 10 cars. So my suggestion is that we keep the current dock. If you need to take the cars off the street, the guy across the street doesn't like the cars, he doesn't like looking at them, perhaps the best thing to do would be to just move that tree line back 10 feet, and you could pull in anywhere from 6 to 10 cars, easy, and keep that location. Let's see. Excuse me with my notes. There was another point I wanted to make. All right, I guess that's about it. The current crab dock, I think you should go with it and maintain it. And use the assessment that should be as an amenity, and keep that dock repaired yearly, and don't let it go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Yes.
Hi, my name is Lynn Killian. I live at 1272 Ocean Parkway, and I am right next to Crab Pier also. I commend everything you said. I agree with everything you said, but one of the best amenities in a neighborhood is the one you use the most. It's close to proximity to your home, and it brings simple joy to everyday life. Watching a sunrise, a sunset, or the calming effect just sitting on a dock, overlooking the water. This is called Blue Mind, and there's actually conferences every year about the meditative and relaxive state by doing this. Or the excitement of kids, of children amused for hours, just using a string, a piece of chicken, and a net. That's amazing crabbing. That's all it would take to do this. We've watched that for hours, as I reiterate. You meet nice people down there and families. That's why we have Crab Pier in the sanctuary. A place where we can walk, ride our bike, and spend time with our children, our grandchildren, spend no money, and have a wonderful day. Unfortunately, many of us are unable to have a home on the water. So we really embrace this amenity that we have. And my husband and I bought our home based on the location to the pier. I have talked to 50 of our neighbors in the sanctuary and close proximity and found an overwhelming support to have the pier repaired and also remain where it is presently located. I have contacted each of you via email, and Mr. Bailey, you more than once, showing our support of the pier at its present location, but unfortunately have not heard any response to any of you except from Mr. Trendick, and I thank you, sir. I'm passing out a petition with signatures showing or urging all of you to repair and keep open the pier located on Charleston Road in Ocean Pines.
Very good.
Thank you.
If I may, I
I'm
might.
sorry, sir, hold on.
Oh.
You'd have to be recognized, please, thank you. Yeah. May I ask, is that the last part of your public comment? Is, You're done, thank you. All right, other public comments? Sir, can I make one, I'm actually going to make a comment. Speaking personally, to your point about only receiving one response, personally, when I see one of the directors respond, I feel that the matter's closed. I personally don't go back and say, just add my 2 cents to that. So it's a personal preference of mine. If the community feels like I should, address, as the president or just as another board member, additionally, once the issue's been addressed, I will certainly do that. But, I don't ignore it when I see one of the other colleagues, follow up on an email. I usually take a back seat to all right, thank you. Sir, please. We'll get to that during the meeting, or during the new business when it comes up. Well, Joe, I understand, but I'd like to keep the cadence and the craft of the meeting. Sir?
Yeah, my name is Tony Stevens, 66 Hatteras in the park. My concern is a safety issue, Ocean Parkway and Manklin Creek. 4-way stop, 2 pedestrian crosswalks going east to west. No crosswalks going north to south. Now, traffic comes through there at the rate of several hundred cars a day, probably even more than that. This time of year, we got kids coming in, grandkids, people visiting. On Manklin, we have the dog park, we got the children's playground, we got all the racket courts. People walk or ride bikes. You've got to come through that intersection. Personally, I've witnessed many nasty things there. As a matter of fact, there was one last night. I came here about a year ago, asked the same question. Mr. Herrick pursued it, went to whoever it applies to, I don't know, and was told that they would take care of it after they resurfaced the trail around the pond, which is very popular, gets a lot of use. But coming from the east side, you've got to fight the traffic to get across the road. Well, since that time, Mr. Herrick told me that he talked with whatever party was responsible, that when that trail was resurfaced, they would put in the crosswalks east to west. It's been surfaced, nothing. Now, somebody one day is going to get hurt there. I listened to all this other stuff about what you guys take care of, thank God. But somebody is going to get hurt. Now, I don't know who's responsible, so I come to you asking what you can do about it. Now, I've listened today talking about money, millions of dollars, thousands of dollars. I'm talking about a few cans of paint and maybe 2 or 3 hours work. And even if it does nothing, at least we've made an attempt to ensure somebody's safety. Now, you may not think it's important. I do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Other public comments? Ma'am.
Doris Lloyd, 65 Wood Duck Drive. I'm thinking of the future, and many of you, and budget, many of you may have read in the newspaper this week of the rising tide and the rising waters on our canals. Maintenance keeps telling me they're not rising. I've been here 30 years, and I know they're rising. I'm on the water, and on northeasters, I get flooded up to the house. What I want to point out that in the future, we have got to think of raising all bulkheads. Last night, going towards the road, Ocean Parkway, there was not even a foot of clearance for the water. And if it rises any, it's going to go over. In the future, those docks have to be raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Joe Reynolds, I own property at 84 Watertown Road. For those people who are concerned about the crabbing dock, there's that item on the agenda by Slobodan Trendic to obtain bids on replacing the dock. I don't know if it's going to be at the same location or proposed to be moved, but Director Parks does not want to tell us at this point. So we'll wait for a little while. Let me echo President Parks's comments about Director Supik and thank her for her service. I believe that her resignation, however, does provide an opportunity for the Board of Directors and this community in general to look very closely at how we appoint a treasurer. The treasurer of the Ocean Pines Association, according to our bylaws, is not required to be a board member. I don't think they're even required to be an association member. That was done with a purpose, and the purpose of not requiring it to be a board member is that the treasurer's position is unique in that if you look at the bylaws, there's a great deal of things that the treasurer is supposed to do. The treasurer is, as described in the bylaws, our chief operating officer of the corporation. I'd like to suggest that the board consider not appointing any board member as a treasurer. For one thing, the treasurer should not be a political position. I don't know if this gentleman here is willing or able or whatever, but he is the director of finance, and I think he should be one of the first people considered to be treasurer and chief financial officer. There may be some other options, but I'd like to offer that one for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Ma'am. Hey, can you bring the microphone over to her? Thank you, Tom.
My name is Joanne Dale. I live at 4 Ivanhoe Court off of Clubhouse Road. I don't know if this is the time to bring this up because it's the first time I've attended one of your meetings, but I live right off of where the golf course is. And a lot of people drive down that road extremely fast, especially when there's an activity going on, which is going to happen next week. I'm proposing to the board to put speed bumps in on that street. We have walkers there. We have walkers with pets. My husband and I walk with the dogs, and I use a wagon. It's on the road when you drive. It says when there's people walking, the Maryland state law says the traffic moves over. Well, I don't want to be the one to move over. I'm the handicapped person. Pedestrian has the right of way. We're not walking in the middle of the street. These cars are coming well over 35, 25 miles an hour. They need to slow down. Now, last week, you put a speed limit sign up there, 25 miles an hour. That helped. Thank you. I appreciate that. But as soon as the sign was going, it was back to normal. The cars were coming in too fast. Too fast for our children, our grandchildren, our pets, our walkers, our bikers. So we're proposing that there be speed bumps in. Now there's speed bumps in South Ocean Pines and some of those fancy communities. Why can't we have them?
Thank you. Other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comments and move into the next item on our agenda, capital purchases. As reported on the agenda, there are no capital purchases for this particular meeting, so I'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is CPI violations. And according to the agenda, there are none being reported, so we'll move into the next item on the agenda, and that is unfinished business. The first is a motion for an RFP for the crab pier, Slobodan.
Thank you, Doug. Topic, Sanctuary Crab Pier motion to instruct the general manager to develop a request for proposal for the replacement of the crab pier. The scope of work should include any desirable pier safety and other improvements and be in compliance with all current laws and regulations, and email draft RFP to the board for review and approval no later than August 31st, 2018. Background. A recent inspection resulted in a closing of the crab pier due to its deteriorating condition and overall safety concerns. A report by an independent professional recommended the pier be replaced. Purpose and effect. Replacing the crab pier will continue to provide a unique amenity to the sanctuary community as originally marketed by the developer. The new pier design should incorporate improved safety and access features as well as the ease of maintenance.
Is there a second? Discussion. Ted?
Yeah, I'd like to, in particular, point out that when you talk about current laws and regulations, that we look at any ADA that may affect that going back in the path. Second, while the recommendation from the expert is replacement, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and get an estimate on repairs to do that there. You'll see where they have replaced over the years multiple parts of hardware and everything else on that thing. And I think there is a due diligence part of the board to go ahead and have presented alternate locations, if there are any, and then we can have that discussion and see where we go for that on that subject there. So I'm in accord. I just want to make sure we don't get into an ADA problem going down the road.
Other discussion? Colette?
Yeah, I would also like to just raise the issue. I know parking is not part of the replacement, but parking is a concern. And I don't know if that would be a separate motion or kind of roll it into this project. If it's going to be at that location, that's going to have to be considered.
Slobodan.
Yeah, I can respond to those couple of comments. First, and also to the community members who raised the issue on this. With regard to parking, I spoke to some people in the county, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that you're looking at a wetland area. Therefore, the ability to create a parking location for potential car traffic is actually going to be almost impossible, because the moment you get off the road, you're into a protected area. So that's one thing that, that kind of almost eliminates the idea of creating a parking lot just off of the road as you enter that space. The issue regarding my motion requesting a replacement is based on the independent inspection. Some of the community members have looked at a pier. The Public Works looked at that pier. Obviously, the condition of that pier is has deteriorated. Bolts have rusted substantially. I'm talking about bolts that are holding the structural part of the floating pier. So, if if the board wants to have kind of a validation whether it's really not possible to repair it and replacement is the long-term best solution, we can certainly always ask another independent person to take a look at this and see whether it's repairable. But my take on looking for another location, I would be opposed to that idea for a couple of reasons. I've been online. The development has been promoted for years based on the pier location being there. Even the turnover agreement between the original developer and Ocean Pines Association at the time it took place specifically states that the association will take over all existing common areas and be responsible for maintaining those, and obviously that implies the crab pier as well. So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact, what we are legally responsible for as we took over the community, and the fact that community has been promoted to the buyers and now homeowners, with the fact that that pier is one of the amenities that was a selling point, an attractive point. So for that reason, I think we as a board really need to decide, should this really be even a consideration of relocation, or keep it where it is, which is what I'm in favor of, and then either consider replacement or repairs, and let's move forward on that.
Yeah, and I'll add, I'm in agreement. Having looked at the turnover agreement, I just don't know, not only from a legal perspective, but look at it from a practicality perspective. I mean, it's already there. We've already got an environment that's been sort of as an amenity to the community. It's used. I just don't see any benefit long-term, unless somebody can talk me down off the ledge here, where we'd benefit the community by moving it somewhere else. So I'm in favor of saying, listen, it's been established. It's part of the environment that we've created. It's called Ocean Pines proper. I think we should give it due course and do whatever it takes. I, too, would also agree. The replacement just, doesn't do it justice. But I would certainly want to have, as part of the evaluation, the differential between replacement cost and actual repair cost. Because I think if that number, that delta is big enough, we may want to have another discussion. But certainly, I would offer that that's got to be part of the analysis that's done. Ed?
And I'm okay if we want to go this way, but my question to you is real simple. How are you going to handle the parking at that location when you're not supposed to be parking on the street and everything else? And so there's a practical part of this as well. I'm fine with, if it were me, I'm replacing it, okay? I've walked it, I've looked at it. I think it's like any other thing that's that old. As soon as you start popping the boards up, you're going to find all kinds of other problems that are hidden. I've gotten down in the water next to it and looked at the bolts and everything, which I'm not sure everybody else has. So I'm in favor of replacing it. I just wanted to do a little due diligence that, hey, here's so we can make a thing. And I don't have a problem leaving it there, but we're kind of ignoring the part where, are we going to have a parking issue? And I agree with you on the wetlands, because that's what the big problem is.
Yeah, let me respond to that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that that's a very important point. And if we'll recall, this was all brought to our attention initially because of the complaints about the parking from the residents. I applaud the ladies' diligence in collecting information from the people that live there who wanted to stay, but this was all brought to our attention because of the people who live there, who were not happy about the parking. And Director Trendick is correct when he says we got stormwater management problems, so with runoff, you can't address the parking by the suggestion of removing trees and creating a parking lot. Unfortunately, we run into that all the time in Ocean Pines. And so I think we have to be very mindful of the fact that this was originally brought to our attention by people who were complaining about the parking of the people who are using it there. However, as it happens in everything that we do here, when we are ready to make a decision about something, there are generally people who are on both sides of the issue. And unfortunately, we can't get to a point where all of the people who are affected will show up and express how they feel about something. So we really have a true sense of everybody's opinion about it. And I hope that when we get to the point of ultimately getting the information back from the RFP and be ready to make a decision, that we, short of sending out engraved invitations, we broadcast to the people who are absolutely going to be affected by whatever decision we make, please, at that point, that this is your chance to say once and for all how we should proceed. So please keep that in mind.
Slobodan.
Thanks, Doug. You know, first of all, just kind of to bring this together, it seems that we're in agreement that this really should be replaced. You know, we have ADA issues, safety, access, et cetera, age of the dock, the deck, improvements that can be made. I think we should you know, look at this motion from that perspective, as is motion calls for the replacement. It appears the only sticking point is the parking. You know, parking is an issue all throughout Ocean Pines, not just this pier. At Ocean Parkway, I bike all the time. I do slaloms around cars that are parked on a parkway. So to single out this particular amenity as a parking issue kind of really can be perceived as using that as an excuse to eliminate amenity that's popular by majority and not liked by minority. So I think the parking, if in fact is a problem for those in the immediate area, and I'm not being disrespectful to them, but you know, there are other ways we can deal with that. We can do a little more enforcement, put the signs up, have a police cruiser come around, give those that are violating parking restrictions a written warning, and from what has been said, really, it's seldom an issue. Most of the time, it's just few cars. So most of the people come via their, you know, foot traffic or bike. And I'm the bicyclist. I'm one of those that visits that place on a bike, and I like the place, and I'm all for you know, doing what the motion is calling for.
And I'm good to go as is. I just wanted to get that out because that, as Cheryl said, was what really kind of sparked the first look at this thing. So as long as we understand, I mean, all we're doing is going out for an RFP now. It's still going to have to be approved. But as long as we understand we're moving forward with this as a, you know, something that just is what it is. So.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for discussion and ask for approval of the motion as presented to have an RFP go out for replacement of the crabbing pier. All those in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Record is noted. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a discussion under unfinished business of the second reading of Resolution B08. Colette.
Okay. I'll grab my paperwork here. So the background is that the Board of Directors approved a working group to develop this resolution on ethics and conduct. Resolution B08 is the product of the group's work. Resolution B08 was further refined based on input from the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, OPA Council, individual members of the association, including specific review by Jim Trummel, who is identified as the guru, the legal guru for the Bylaws Committee. A discussion in a public meeting and based on feedback arising from the first reading, which took place on May 24th. The second reading today includes red line changes based on input from fellow directors based on need for increased clarity to the language, and also specifically that the policy should apply not just to directors but also to officers of the association who are not directors. In addition, there was a last-minute concern expressed regarding the power of an ethics committee to refer matters to legal counsel, which was addressed through additional language that was added since the red line version went out for public review for this meeting. Based on this blue line revision, I'll be recommending that consideration of the motion to approve this resolution be delayed until our July regular meeting so that the board has a chance to consider this new language, and in order to refer any lingering concerns regarding its consistency with our governing documents can be addressed specifically back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. But before I do this, I want to just take this opportunity to thank the board for approving the motion to begin with, and to thank the work group who helped develop it. The work was born of a shared concern that the level of discourse and collaboration among directors was in need of elevation. It was a shared belief that the governing documents had not provided the level of specificity in its guidance on ethics and conduct that would be required to achieve this elevation in communication and collaboration. The work also addressed the shared concern that the governing documents did not provide sufficient guidance regarding removal of directors for cause. The resulting resolution was informed by the work group's consultation with documents from the American Bar Association, the Community Associations Institute, and other private and public institutions that had developed and implemented similar guidelines and policies for their boards. The final product went through many revisions. I can show you, this has been a 10-month process. This file represents revisions and documents reviewed to develop this. It went through many revisions based on the collective review of the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, as I said, review by OPA Legal Counsel, and the others named earlier. I do wish to thank the members of the work group for their thoughtful, insightful, and diligent work. These individuals are Tom Terry, Tom Herrick, Ted Maroney, Jeff Knepper, Donna McElroy, and myself. This group includes current and past board members, board presidents, current and past members of the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, and members of the legal profession. We as a group, as a work group, will be the first to acknowledge that this document is not perfect. Our aim was to produce our best effort, realizing that after implementation there may be need for refinement or revisions based on practicality and usefulness of this document. What we have here to discuss today represents that best effort based on many hours of discussion, review of many documents, and consideration of input from many sources. That said, I will ask for a second for discussion purposes if anybody has discussion that they would like to add before we go forward.
Yeah, I second. I want to open the floor for discussion, so.
Yeah, I'll be happy to make a comment on this subject because I've been very I think vocal on this for some time now. I'm totally in favor of holding directors to a higher to a certain level of ethical standards and conduct, and I think that's been obvious for some time now. My concern is in the way we are going about this. And instead, I have basically shared with the board a simple approach to how we can address this particular requirement by looking at a list of code of ethics that can be presented to each officer and each director for acknowledgement and signature. And I've shared that again with all of you early this morning and as well as a month ago. The other thing I wanted to point out, which is in my reaction to Director Horn's putting this off till next month, speaking as an individual director, I'm looking at the election, which is 6 weeks away, and I believe that for this board to try to pass on a resolution of this magnitude that will basically affect the new board that will come on board in 6 weeks, with at least 3 new directors and possibly 4. I wish Ted Maroney good luck with his campaign efforts. But could you imagine this board voting on something like this that 3 new directors will have to comply with and possibly 4? I believe it would be unfair of this board to even attempt to do something like this. And my recommendation is that this be put off till August. And if the new board decides to entertain it as a topic or a motion for a vote, that would be for that board at that time to consider. But this is how I feel, and I just wanted to let everybody know in this public forum my views on the subject. Thank you.
Let me comment. So I agree in concept, but for different reasons. Number one, I don't agree that a board passing something prior to a new board coming in really has a lot of effect. Plain and simple, boards change all the time, and if we took that approach, we'd never conduct any business in June or July. So that's one of the things. However, I'm in agreement in the sense that I think we're adding a layer of administrative management and subjectivity to something that's already, I think, reasonably well stated in the bylaws. So now I do understand the attempt to try to clarify some of the things that are associated with that, maybe just for purposes of being very more detail-oriented with regard to what things can or qualify as a topic that could be brought up for the removal of a director, et cetera, et cetera. I believe also that, as idealistic as it sounds, that when you sit in this chair, that you assume some responsibilities that have been stated by things like the Community Associate Institute and general practices for somebody who holds a leadership position. So the fact that we have to get into this level of detail, I'm not saying is wrong. I'm saying that may add a level of burden, and subjectivity that, quite frankly, we may not need right now. So I am kind of on the fence, but probably not in favor of moving forward with this, despite the wonderful work that the committee did. And I think that it's something that maybe we take a look at it and maybe refamiliarize ourselves with the existing bylaws and make sure there isn't anything that hasn't been overlooked or taken for granted that needed to be addressed by this this proposed resolution. Cheryl.
In response to the timing of this, it couldn't be more appropriate to try to implement this prior to the election. What better way to indoctrinate the new board members, if they turn out to be entirely new, as to the expectations of the outgoing board, having lived through the turmoil that we've lived through in the past 2 years. So I think the timing is entirely appropriate. Because of the turmoil that we had in the past, that was one of the reasons that sparked this, by a new member who was a former resident only, who recognized there's something wrong and I want to try to fix it. And thank you, Director Horn, for taking that on. I think it's entirely appropriate, and I do think that it is entirely appropriate to set the stage for what could be a new board majority if all 4 people come in with like-minded ideas. They could very well be the new board majority. So why not set the stage and the expectations that the board has for what we expect from them?
Other comments? Slobodan.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Just to echo what Doug said, there's plenty in our bylaws, existing bylaws, and in our resolutions that defines conflict of interest and other areas. So all we need to do as a board really take the time to learn and comply with what is in place. And I believe what is in place is sufficient, and I'm not trying to discredit the effort and what's been put together. But I believe there is enough in our governing documents that give us the opportunity to address behaviors that are perhaps not appropriate on behalf of the directors. So that's my thought on that.
Ted.
Yeah, I would go back to the genesis of this whole thing. The genesis of this whole thing was a year ago when you, as a director, if 4 people had said go, you were gone, okay? And the idea here was to put in something that further defined what was responsible, but more important, put in something that was a check and balance on any majority of the board acting on their own will because a board member or other members didn't go along with it. And by having that separate group that came in and looked at it, it would validate some of what was being said, because you could easily have been off this board a year ago if we had a majority at that meeting and had 4 votes gone. You'd have been gone, and no one or 5 votes, there were 5 votes in there. Whatever the majority was necessary to get you off the board was prepared to go and do that. So the idea here was to put something in and to try it for a while and see what worked and what didn't work. And, whether it happens in July, I don't think the timing matters. I remember the board that fired Tom Olson did it just before the new board took position. They fired a general manager, okay, because the votes were probably not going to be there after the election. So I don't think timing issues this, but I am interested in moving the thing forward, and then the board can look at it either in July or in August. But I don't think we ought to just say, hey, we're just going to throw it back to the next group. I think we ought to move forward, table in the motion here until it can be worked out, and go back to bylaws to look at the red and the blue line issues, and then let's see where we are in July. If it comes up, we can talk about it then. If it's still in the process of being refined, then it gets pushed back to the new board.
I'll entertain one more item for discussion so we can move on. Slow it down.
Ladies first.
I'm sorry. I'm Steve. My apologies.
I echo the issue on the timing. I also point out that this has been a 10-month-long process during which input from other directors and members has been solicited. I find it disconcerting that at the 9th hour, I'm getting feedback that says this is a no-go from directors who had voted to begin with to pursue this effort based on the shared concern that the governing documents did not adequately address the definition of cause for removal of a director, and the shared concern regarding mechanisms for providing guidance on the ethics of conduct of directors during their business meetings and their communications that had deteriorated and created some serious problems in the past 2 years, not the least of which is the one that led to the potential removal of Director Trendick last year. I looked upon this as an opportunity to provide guidelines as well as protections for directors by creating specificity that we could all agree to. And I think this document has achieved that. I'm very proud of the work that this group has done. There's been, incredible back and forth and solicitation of input. I do agree I would prefer to table this and have it looked at by bylaws a final time. But I do have to say that 10 months, this 10-month process kind of reminds me of the time I gave birth without anesthesia. That was a painful and lengthy process as well. And this is beginning to surpass the painful and lengthiness of that. So I think it's time to cut off input to this. I think we've got the input and the language that we need. I do think we need to have a final look from bylaws. I would like bylaws to receive specific direction as to what the concerns are with respect to the governing documents. They did look at it without that, and there were objections that came back even after they signed off on it. And so I think in fairness to them and in fairness to the work, if there are objections, they need to be specifically stated as this is given back to bylaws to review. Thank you.
All right, on that note, I'm going to close the floor for discussion. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a motion to adopt the proposed resolution B08. Colette? Yes, this is, I know. Yeah.
I'm moving that we table the motion.
Please, we have to memorialize
I
it.
move that we table the motion till the July meeting, July 27th meeting, and that it be reconsidered at that time.
Is there a second to the removal of the motion from the agenda? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of removing the, tabling the motion till the next meeting, say aye.
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 I'm abstaining.
One abstention, please record accordingly. Next item on the agenda is another discussion item, MediaCom franchise agreement status. Slow it on.
Thank you, Doug. Topic, status of new franchise agreement with MediaCom. Concise statement. I would like the board and the general manager to have a public discussion on the status of the franchise agreement with MediaCom. Specifically, who are the individuals negotiating on behalf of OPA, and what is causing delays in executing the new franchise agreement. Background. Doug Parks and Cheryl Jacobs informed the board in the fall of last year that the discussions with Mediacom representatives were taking place. The existing franchise agreement between Mediacom and OPA expired on June 3, 2018. The board is yet to receive any draft of the new franchise agreement for review and its approval.
Open the floor for discussion. Is there a second to open the floor for discussion?
Yes, second.
Okay. Floor is open.
Mr. President, comment?
Please.
Okay. One of your questions, Director Trendick, was who are the individuals negotiating on behalf of OPA? Myself, obviously, as the general manager, with a lot of technical help and advice from Director Jacobs and Member Tom Terry. As far as delays in executing the new franchise agreement, following up on what President Parks said earlier, we are going on a month-to-month basis with Mediacom now. We obviously, and I think you know, and the board knows, maybe the membership hasn't picked up on it, we went for a long time trying to negotiate, having some other conversations with Comcast, Verizon, and those other separate providers. And I wanted to take the opportunity here to give an example of something that, well, why can't Comcast come in and do something? It's not simple enough that Comcast can run a line from your ditch to your home. They don't have the network in the ground, literally. They are close to the south gate, and I think anybody would love to come in and get straight to the park because you got a big group of customers there. But if we were to, the biggest change for everybody's benefit is that the easements are no longer just available to Mediacom. They're available to everybody, but it requires a significant capital investment by Comcast or whoever else, Blue Moon, if you would just pick a weird name out of the air. It wouldn't matter who it was. They would have to put in their own infrastructure or buy it from Mediacom. So it's a big capital investment for anybody else to provide it. It's not just a simple run the line from the nearest pole or underground wire to your property. So it's just not that easily available. Second, arrived yesterday, this 55-page document from our lawyer. It's draft version at this point. Just literally got that yesterday. So we've got another 7 questions to answer there. It's wonderful 55 pages of technical and wonderful legalese that requires several readings for each paragraph to understand it. That's not to say anything bad about our lawyers. So again, we're on a month-to-month basis now. Again, got this yesterday, so we'll be getting that next steps with the draft.
Okay. Yeah, as a follow-up, so I think, Slobodan, to your point, the franchise agreement status, okay? So really where we are right now is it wasn't ready for presentation to the board because the draft agreement went to the attorneys. They vetted it. They sent it, the first draft agreement back over to Mediacom, who in turn sent it back over to our attorneys. And JB is handling that part of it. So it hasn't risen to the board level yet because there's a lot of minutia going on. As he mentioned, there's specific technical terms and some of the other longer term issues. So, but I think maybe to kind of help everybody along, if you're not opposed to it, maybe we share at least this particular version because I think we're getting close. No? Oh, they asked not to. Okay. So, all right, very good point. Thank you for that information. The attorney has asked that there's some non-disclosure there until they get to a certain point. Okay, so be advised that the process is ongoing. It's not ready yet, and I think the most important point is stated by Mediacom that it's not affecting the current agreement because they will continue month to month as long as we are operating in good faith with them. Ted.
Yeah, just a few other points, just so everybody's kind of clear on a couple of things. This Mediacom contract is different than what we've done in the past because what it does is it sets the stage if a Verizon or a Comcast or somebody else comes in. We've got a document that sets a stage across that we can use, change the names, and move forward there. So this document, it really has to encompass a lot more than previous Mediacom contracts did, which is why it's taking a little bit longer, and it's 55 pages or so versus a half a dozen pages. That's number one. Number two, I want to go back to talk about the bulk thing a little bit, because everybody needs to understand, as Doug said, that bulk basically means every single homeowner in the association gets charged per month. And even if you decided you wanted to go with a different carrier, you still get charged that per month. So we would have to lock the entire association in for 5 years as part of this deal, with a 5% increase per year built in, and it only gives you one setup in your house, so you would have to pay additional. So whether the bulk rate is lower or not, it's not quite as simple as it looks. And so it's not like trash where we negotiate for the community and then you can either opt in or out. With bulk agreements, and if you go back and look at some of the FCC rulings that have happened here where homeowners associations have tried to people have tried to opt out, there is no opting out. And also think about this: if you have people who are not paying their dues, the association still owes it. So you are paying for them to have it. And there's no incentive for the provider to cut it off, because they're still getting the money from the association, because the association is the guarantor. So it's a little more complicated than we're just getting a cheap price. We're built in for 5 years. And also, it doesn't address how long it would take them to run fiber through the entire community to get us up. So I just want everybody to know we're looking at this to make sure we have the maximum flexibility as we go forward.
Cheryl, go ahead, and I want to add a point.
I want to add to the amount of people that have also taken a look at this. We had a contract review group that also has provided input in terms of some of the language that we want to make sure is in there, not only to initially try to make this a template for other providers if we get to that point, but so that we are completely protected here, and trying to have a starting point excuse me, for negotiations with Mediacom. There is no longer any exclusivity. The rules have changed, and so that's why we were also working on trying to bring in competition. We all know that that gets the cost of goods lowered when you have competition. So we have attempted, and that has been part of what's taken up additional time, because lo and behold, if we had somebody like a Comcast or a Verizon who said, we can come in and we can give you the service that you're looking for at a cheaper price, better reliability, yada, yada, whatever, certainly we'd have been open to that. Unfortunately, that never happened, but all of that negotiation takes time, and along the way, of course, we're still working with the current provider, Mediacom, in good faith, hoping that they would not want to leave our community. So there has been a great deal of time that is required to bring this to the point where we are now, and that is that we finally have potentially a first draft that is going to be looked at by the people who are working on this process, but it is not yet ready for prime time. So that's where we are.
So to follow up on the points that both Ted and Cheryl made, understand too that part of the regulations, I think it was in 2006, there's no longer any exclusivity in a right-of-way or an easement. All right, so that part of it's been gone, and actually that's one of the reasons why Mediacom had to draft a brand new contract, because some of the terms and conditions in the original contract, contained references to exclusivity of a right-of-way. So they couldn't obviously just amend the contract and continue it on, so they had to come into a brand new contract. Hence, also the reason why Comcast knew that, and that's why they approached us some time ago, with bringing in their engineers and what they call their walkthrough group about looking at exactly what it would take to get their services delivered to the residences here in Ocean Pines. And the byproduct of that effort was the proposal we saw from them about the bulk services, because the infrastructure, the build-out, and all the other things that needed to be done to bring the service into a residential area like this was just far beyond any kind of normal, I think they called it their budgetary business development model, in which case their algorithms, it just wouldn't, there was too much upfront cost, and they couldn't recover that cost based on how they do their business. So I think it's important to make that differentiator. The point I'm trying to make is that we're not what's the right word? We're not in bed with Mediacom. We've actually, as Ted pointed out, and as Cheryl and I have talked about the fact that we had Verizon in here. They said no. Comcast came in. You now know what they're proposing. Mediacom is certainly there. I think the smart thing to do, obviously, is to work our best effort to get the Mediacom contract in the best terms and conditions we can for the residents. And also, what it turns out to be at that point is now those right-of-ways are no longer exclusive. So there might be other providers. As if you look forward, as media is consumed in a much different way, rather than just standard cable TV, you're starting to look at the way data streaming works now going forward. Other companies, knowing that that restriction has been lifted with regard to coming into the neighborhood, may now want to be able to take a look at trying to penetrate the customer base in Ocean Pines to see if it's worthwhile. We've removed that restriction. Certainly, they are now open to come in and look at anything. We also maybe even consider an RFP later on down the road to, solicit other broadband and service providers to come in and into the neighborhood. But for right now, the focus is to get Mediacom structured in a way that it can be a benefit to the community at this point in time. So, I'm sorry. So, all right, Cheryl.
Just to add to that, in fact, we have, talked to other outside service providers, so it hasn't been just exclusively Comcast and Verizon.
Maryland Broadband.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear what's been going on. It's good for the association. It's good for other directors to hear as well. Let me make a comment, and I also have a question. Perhaps I'd like to get the answer to the question before I make my comment. You said there is a 55-page draft, confidential, and I think you indicated this is not available to the board for review. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
And who approved that kind of a condition, that the board has no access to that?
The attorney.
And has the board been made aware of that? I would like to follow up on that specific issue later, offline with the board, under confidentiality agreement. Now, let me make the following comment. The intent of my topic for the purpose of this discussion was really not about other efforts that took place with Comcast or other potential interested parties, but it was really to let the community know what's going on with Mediacom. We knew about the contract expiring. It's 9 months, and 9 months later, we now have the first draft. There are a couple of concerns that I have shared with you, and the reason why I want to see that draft, because I want to make sure certain things are addressed in a very transparent way, especially if those concerns are in a form of cost that will be passed through Mediacom directly to the homeowners of this association. So I'm not going to say anything else than that, but I would like to certainly make sure that the board, full board, has total access to this draft document. And if the legal advised against that, I want the board to be made aware of under what laws that is being used as a condition for not having access on important contract of this nature that impacts the entire community.
Perhaps I didn't explain it properly. I'm not at all suggesting that the entire board is not going to have access to this. Absolutely they will. I'm just saying this initial draft, which we just got, is not ready yet to be shared with the entire board because the attorney is looking for some feedback relative to the questions that were raised by this group that's been working on it, so that we make sure that it has been included in what he's given. So I'm not at all suggesting that you're not going to get it. Of course you are. I mean, yes, absolutely.
I just want to make sure that the concerns I brought up are addressed in this draft.
So noted. Other discussion? All right, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, discussion of the country club renovation. Ted?
All right, JB already hit a lot of the hot points. We had a special meeting on the 14th, got some interest back from the community in talking about it. We met on the 15th. We met again yesterday with the architect with a smaller list. If you are looking for information in the layout, if you go to the Ocean Pines website, under Forms and Documents, there's a line item that says Public Works. Click on that. You will see the current drawings, the full set of current drawings on there, as well as the notes that came out of our very first meeting. And early next week, as soon as JB and I have a chance to have some breath here, we'll go ahead and get the minutes and notes out from yesterday's meeting to everybody. As JB said, there are two major issues. One is the design of the elevator, and two is taking care of some inherent roof problems to ensure that whatever money we spend in there, we don't end up having the roof leak. And then just as a general thing, a lot of the items that came up from within the community and also within staff and the board are going to be listed within the RFP as what are known as ad alternates. So for instance, I'll give you a simple one. The railing on the deck, we're going to get an ad alternate to do it with just the vinyl PVC, to do it with the glass, and to do it with cable. And that way the decision can be made when the bid comes in, you know, what is the difference in cost. So that kind of stuff we're going to have so that we can make a selection based on it. And I'll give you one other, for instance, replacement of windows. If you take a look at the Becker Morgan report from 2011 or 2016, a lot of the windows are failing. So we've asked to give us an ad alternate. Is it cheaper to fix it now or to fix it in 2 or 3 years? So we're trying to get it so it's kind of like an a la carte menu where you can pick and choose what you want out of it. And looking at time frames, we roughly did it yesterday afternoon. The hope is to get started on, to get an RFP out this month, next month, and to still be able to have it for consideration for the new board to move forward in October with the second floor renovation upgrade. So,
is there a second for further discussion?
I'll second it.
Okay, further discussion.
Yeah, I just want to first, I want to compliment Ted, our colleague, for spearheading this effort. I think it demonstrates that it was well needed, and I think the special meeting that we held a couple of weeks ago on this subject really jump-started a very healthy discussion, and the results of that are very obvious. Especially with some golfing community being involved, really produced some additional comments and observations that were of great help. One of the things that I did notice, and I would like to leave Ted with this idea, is I didn't see a golf advisory committee, present as a committee, and I would like to suggest, with what we have to date, if we can pass this on formally to the committee through Herrick as a liaison to the committee, and ask them to take a look at it and then give us a feedback. I think that would really complete the picture. Thank you.
Real quick, Doug, Bob Kessler, who is the chair of the committee, was there yesterday, and I specifically grabbed him and Larry Perrone, who's chair of the Golf Advisory Group, and made sure that they're on the same page, and Bob said yes, and he said he is going to refer to his committee, but I'll also to Tom to do it. So I've already touched those bases a number of different times in the background, but the golf committee will know it, and I'll make sure that both Tom and Bob have the connection.
If you can just ask the committee to give board a formal feedback, just as a matter of record, I think that would be very helpful to have.
Consider it done.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, let me also echo personal thanks to for Ted for spearheading this effort. I think it's a great example of taking input from the community in an area that they are the subject matter experts, and really matter of fact, most of these, if not all of these changes, have come from their suggestions and recommendations. So it's a great example of community input to really drive what needs to be the correct solution. So thank you, and thanks to those on the Golf Advisory Committee and the Golf Committee who gave us input to help us move forward. So, all right,
President Park, just so that everybody knows, so a little bit more on the time frame. From yesterday's meeting, we'll take about 2 more weeks to get some schematic drawings, not the drawings to go to bid, but the schematic drawings back to us. We'll look at them then, have another meeting together, and then it'll be another 2 to 3 weeks after that for them to have the drawings available to actually go out to bid. But once we get the schematic drawings back, that's sort of basically the final review before, so that once they do the drawings, we don't have to have another meeting to approve that to go out.
All right, seeing no other discussion, I'll close that item. Move on to the next item on the agenda, discussion for resolutions governing advisory committees. Ted?
Good news, I'm not going to have the second reading of 47 motions, revisions like last time. At the Executive Council meeting, we talked a little bit about trying to get input from committees coming back. In July, I'm going to be sending in concert with the Bylaws Committee, C-01, which is how committees are supposed to operate, to both the liaison and the committee chairs, and also the recommended C changes out to those individuals to see if they have any comment. I think this will probably drag on into the new board. So we are moving forward. We do have a schedule. The committee chairs were in agreement. The liaisons, I believe, are all in agreement, and we have a plan going forward.
Is there a second for further discussion? Thank you. Further discussion? Thank you for the information. Close that section, move into new business. First item under new business, motion to an internal HR review. Slobodan.
Thanks, Doug. Motion to instruct the general manager to complete internal HR review of the following areas by September 14, 2018. Employee handbook, compliance, and employee benefits. Background. Because of recognizing the need for a more dedicated internal resource, the board took action on February 25, 2018, and approved a new position for human resources specialist. The general manager immediately filled that position. Purpose and effect: to meet the requirement per association's bylaws, section 514, Board of Directors duties, D, that calls for periodic review of existing employee benefits, personnel policies, and other employment conditions. The effect is to ensure that OPA is in legal compliance with all current federal and state and local laws and regulations, and to be ready to make adjustment to the company-paid employee benefits as it prepares for the next budget planning cycle.
Is there a second? So noted. Discussion.
One thing, Slobodan, would you take a friendly amendment just to make that October 1st? And the only reason is we'll be ending the summer season right around the 1st of September. We got a new board coming in, and we're going through all of that, and I'd like to give, I believe, the general manager a month to finish pulling that together, which would be early enough for us to put it into budget cycle.
Yeah, let me respond to that idea, just so you understand how I came up with a date. You know, first of all, we know that our HR specialist is already working on some of the things, and I wanted to put a deadline in place because one of the things the board needs to do that we kind of fell behind last fall is to provide the GM with the budget guidelines, and that's supposed to happen in September. It's very difficult for us to do that if we really haven't taken the time to review employee benefits, which has been a hot topic during the past budget season for some of us, and I think for community also. So the date that I proposed was really to give the board a feeling for what those benefits should look like, what should stay, what should go, and give it in a form of guideline to the GM so that he can really start the work that he needs to start in September. If you have an idea of how, you know, how we can entertain your date and still give the GM proper guidelines within the deadline that the board has, I'm open to suggestion.
Ted.
We can leave the September 14th in, but also think about what we're giving guidance. We're really giving guidance. We want to bring it into certain norms, okay, rather than, hey, we want to make this X, this and that X, Y, and that we get it. I just wanted to have enough time to get it all pulled together here. You know, and I would, if you don't mind, ask JB, do you think September 14th is a realistic date I know you're pretty far along on a lot of this, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, all three of those particular things that you mentioned, Director Tender, are ongoing. In particular, there's the handbook. That's in draft mode. Legal counsel has been a part of that effort. That's about ready to come to you. Compliance and employee benefits, Nate's been working on those two issues as well, as a lot of other things that he's been working on. So all three of those are ongoing. I don't see September 14th being an issue.
Thank you.
Ted, in response to your idea on a date, I think we can accomplish, I think both. We can certainly entertain your friendly amendment. Also, you're okay? All right.
Just move forward. Yeah, just move forward. We don't need.
All right, then let's
All right,
leave it.
Other discussion. Other discussion. All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item under new business, a discussion item to establish a standing audit committee. Mr. Lebanon.
Thank you, Doug. Establish a standing audit committee. Concise statement. I request that the board ask the Budget and Finance Advisory Committee to provide an opinion on establishing a standing audit committee. Speaking as an individual director, I believe there is clear need for the board to enhance the accountability through the entire association. My recommendation is that this audit committee should, at the minimum, have these four primary responsibilities: oversee external and internal audit functions, oversee the financial reporting process, oversee the internal controls, and ensure appropriate channels of communication exist for whistleblowers or fraud activities or other illegal acts. Background. Many recent and other past events led me to conclude that establishing an audit committee is a necessary step to strengthen our good corporate governance. The role of the audit committee will be extremely important, as it will also monitor the performance of many critical functions, such as the treasurer as a chief financial officer of the association. And when the association decides to change its external auditor or to decide to perform specifically targeted audits.
So I'll take a second for open floor for discussion. Yeah, So you made one statement which I really agree with. I think based on the fact that we've got a Budget and Finance Committee, we should merely refer this to the Budget and Finance Committee as a request for them to come back to the board with a recommendation. I don't think we need to say that we need to form an audit committee yet. I do like the idea of saying, hey guys, we're thinking about this, please vet it for us and come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, Doug, thanks for that, for highlighting that. That's precisely what my intent is. What struck me as a need to bring this to the board's attention and ask the committee to look into this is basically two things. And I think the member of the community, Joe Reynolds, indicated how important the Treasury function is and why it's important that we have a committee in place that can look after these kind of issues as future appointments take place. The Budget and Finance Committee is also in the best place to look at its own roles and responsibilities, because there are some that can perhaps be integrated with the Audit Committee. So as they look at their own role and the role of the Audit Committee as it should be created, I think they might come up with a hybrid approach to address both issues. And as you know, I'm also in favor of basically benchmarking ourselves against other communities. I ended up going on the websites of the two largest communities in the state of Maryland, Columbia Association and Montgomery Village. Both of them have audit committees. Neither one of them has Budget and Finance Committee. And that's what motivated me really to look at this and give us kind of an outside-of-the-box view. But at the end, I think the committee, Budget and Finance Committee, is going to be in the best position to give us professional opinion.
Ted?
I'm good to go with referring it to them, and then we can talk about what they come back to us with.
So I'll take the action item to bring the issue to the Budget and Finance Committee. Okay? Any other discussion? Moving on, thank you. Moving on. This item was added to our agenda at the beginning of the meeting, the motion for the 401K matching. Colette?
The motion is effective May 1, 2018. Ocean Pines Association shall match 100% of eligible employee contributions up to 3% of pay, and such matching employer contributions shall be immediately vested. Also effective May 1, 2018, Stephen Phillips, Director of Finance, shall be appointed limited trustee, replacing Art Carmine. Background: on March 29, 2018, the board approved a motion to fund matches to employee contributions to 401K accounts up to 3% of pay. Our plan administrator requires specific language in a board-adopted motion in order to fund the plan. This motion provides that language. In addition, it is now time to name our recently hired Director of Finance limited trustee for the plan. This motion also satisfies this need.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, I have a few questions I would like to ask and also highlight a couple of things. Perhaps I'll go with maybe with the easiest one. We are recommending that Director of Finance Steve Phillips be appointed as a limited trustee. This came to us, I think, pretty recently as a topic that we had to take a look at. I did some research on the trustee as a subject, and everything I found talks about the trustee, but not really the limited trustee role. I don't even know what limited trustee roles are, so I'm kind of uncomfortable voting. And the third-party administrator that made these recommendations, including the recommendations made from the staff, really nothing was given to us that defines what is the role and the responsibility of limited trustee. So I wonder if anybody can give us that intelligence, that information now, so we know what we are voting and when we are thinking of appointing Steve Phillips.
Well, it's a good point, although Art Carmine is already a limited trustee, so it's not that we're doing anything new, but to your point, maybe we do need to have information that sort of spells that out. Do we know if that's available anywhere? I didn't put my hands on it. I took the fact that we already had one, that we're just bringing it up to date because Art is not going to be with us much longer with regard to his employment. So, Steve, can you shed some light on that for us?
I do not actually know the definition of limited trustee. I do know there are two other individuals listed as trustees on the plan. We just wanted to, I guess, undergo the formality here, since Art's no longer a employee of the organization, that I would inherit that role, and I know that we at least have an annual meeting to discuss the investment options and such with our investment company.
That's the main task of the administrator.
Right. Right. So,
not necessarily. I think the role of trustee, depending upon whether it's corporate internal trustee or whether it's third-party appointed trustee, their fiduciary responsibilities. Some trustees are responsible for the investment products. Others are not, depending upon how you appoint one. And I think this is why I want to make sure that we as a board understand when we are voting to appoint a limited trustee that we really know how that role is different from a trustee, which I hope is in place already according to our 401K plan. And as you know, 3 months ago, I brought this question up to the general manager and the treasurer at that time, Pat Supik, because I noticed that the 401K is not even listed in our existing employee handbook as a benefit. There's no description of the plan. And I was really, as an individual director, really not clear on what this plan is all about and what is the role, who are the trustees, who are the third-party administrators. So what's good about this 401K issue coming up today is because it's really begging for some questions, starting with a limited trustee. If this is really something that we can't answer today, then I would suggest we strike that language out from the motion, defer it to a later time. If the board is comfortable voting as is, then, you know, we can continue with the discussion.
Well, I would suggest that for now, we do this because this gets our provider, they're able to fund it, get everything in there, and that this become part of what's due to us on September 14th, because that addresses employee benefits, that addresses the handbook, and that kind of, are we in compliance? And I think you've raised a good point. Who are the other trustees? How does this work? Third party, all of that good stuff. But I think short term that we need to replace Art Carmine on there, and whoever that may be, we need to do that as part of getting moving forward. It doesn't change anything, but I do think you're right long term, but I kind of want to make sure people get their funding in there.
Yeah, this issue came up as a recommendation from the HR environment. We did the due diligence to make sure that it was in the budget, so it's already been accounted for. The fact that we are going through, we'll just call it the paperwork, to make sure that we keep the process going. I'm in favor of moving forward the way the motion is stated, but Slobodan and I think we have some ancillary work to do in the sense that we do need to follow that up, and I think we need to charge the general manager and any of the subordinates with regard to the folks that carry the carrier for the plan and the director of finance to provide those answers for us. So with regard to the things that came up in your discussion points, the 4, I think we add one more to that discussion point that says, you know, the sort of definition and explanation of some of the specifics regarding the trustee, the limited trustee, and other things associated with that carrier plan.
All right, let me take another part of the motion, which is actually a lot more difficult to address, and I don't know if we can do it at this time. Director Horn's language reads 100% of all eligible employees, and that the contributions shall be immediately vested. That is, you know, to me, vesting is an area of 401K plan that's debatable, whether it's immediate, whether it's staggered over a 3-year period, whether it's at the end of the 3-year period, whether it's after first year of anniversary employment. So I just want to make sure that the directors here understand what actually we are being asked to vote on. We're being asked to vote on a component of a 401K plan, meaning a vesting period being immediate. And we haven't even seen the 401K plan. We don't even know what the existing plan looks like. Let me state another thing. Eligible employees. If you look at ERISA language, Employee Retirement Income Security Act, eligible employees are any employees with at least 1,000 hours of work per year, which is 25 weeks. So that means any of our employees that work 1,000 hours in a year are basically eligible, and that's what we are being asked to vote on. Have we considered that? Have we budgeted that? Because we look at the budget that we passed, and the number of eligible employees is what, 150 or with the part-timers. I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting for, but right now, I don't feel comfortable voting in favor of this motion because there are too many questions.
I can answer.
Hold on 1 second. Can we rescind Robert's Rules of Order to continue discussion outside the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Robert's Rules of Order are rescinded. Steve?
Okay, Director Trendick, in answer to your question, yes, it is budgeted. The previous plan documents did have contributions for all employees. Like you said, the 1,000 hours is the correct threshold for eligibility. What we wanted to get here was a vote on clarification, because the previous motion, which eliminated the safe harbor, didn't really specify what we wanted to put in the new plan documents, which was the vesting piece, which the previous plan, it vested initially 100%. So really all it's doing is creating what we already had in place The only thing is we're adding this new language into the plan doc with the elimination of the safe harbor, and that safe harbor contribution is what we had in the initial budget discussions. That is where people were getting matches if they didn't contribute anything at all. That is not the case anymore. You have to contribute. So now it is, you get a match up to 3%. You get 100% of that contribution match. 3% maxes out. So it's clarification. It's $117,000 in the budget, which would cover all employees.
No change from what we've been doing.
Yeah, so, case in point, this basically undoes the oversight of removing the safe harbor, adding back in what we had generalized in that last motion. So this basically just fixes it.
So do you know how many employees are currently eligible for 401k plan? Total? I'm not saying participate, but eligible.
I know we have 78 full-time and probably half of the part-time.
There's a handful of the part-times that meet those requirements.
But not all part-timers meet that.
Not all, no.
Right.
So
Just
do we have?
Less than 100, I would say, in the range of 80 to 100.
Okay. So you're basically, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, the immediately vested language that's in this motion is something that's been in the 401k safe harbor plan all of this time, so we're not introducing a new vesting period?
Correct. That is my understanding, yes.
That's your understanding, but you're not absolute?
That is what I've been told by our investment advisors.
That'd be here a year. Right. Yeah. Still have to be here a year, so it's not, immediate in that sense.
Okay, say that again so
No,
everybody hears it.
In terms of being eligible for the plan, you have to be here a year. But in terms of the vesting piece of your money becoming available, that is vested immediately.
Let me make another comment, because this is very important, and it's something for you to look into, because 401k is a serious subject for many different reasons. Under the ERISA definition, eligible employees, if you have a company that has at least 100 eligible employees, by law, we're required to do independent third-party audit on a 401k plan. Are you aware of that? Okay, so
what was your number you just said?
over 100 eligible employees. Well, I just want to make sure that when you look at eligible employees, besides just full-timers, anybody with over 1,000 hours is considered eligible employee. We got, with part-timers, 150-plus people. So I think, and I have not seen anything in our annual report, even from our regular auditors, there was no auditor note on recommendation to take a look at our 401k and determine whether we are at that point with eligible employees that independent audit on our 401k plan is required. And that's something that really our third-party administrators should be telling us or alerting us. So if that hasn't happened, I would encourage you to look into that.
Colette?
Just to note that in addition to the 1,000-hour requirement, there are age requirements. And so we have quite a few part-time employees that would not meet that age requirement, I believe.
Additional discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And abstain. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, the motion for the review of the activities for the White Horse Park boat ramp. Colette?
Right, the motion is that the Board of Directors provide specific directions to the Marine Activities Advisory Committee as to the collection of data regarding the number of vehicles accessing the White Horse boat launch during the current boating season. The attached spreadsheet should be used as a format for entering the information needed to gather the information that the Board of Directors will need to evaluate usage of this amenity so as to ensure the accuracy and usefulness of the data collected. The background is that there have been complaints by members who wish to launch their boat using the White Horse boat launch facility, that there is insufficient space for parking vehicles with trailers so as to ensure safe access to the launch ramps, and that there are excessive wait times for gaining access to one of the 2 launch ramps during the spring and summer boating season. In order to determine the extent of the problem and determine appropriate remedies, it is necessary to gather data on usage. I am going to offer a little bit of discussion based on input I received from Tom Herrick, who's the liaison to this committee, who is unable to attend today. May I do that?
Once we get a second.
Okay.
Move forward.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Discussion.
So in the 428 General Board meeting, it was decided to task the Marine Activities Advisory Committee with gathering this information. And an initial report by Tim Mullen, chair of the MAC, during the 6/7/18 Executive Council meeting indicated that the data collection they were pursuing was looking at a single time frame on the weekends, 10:30 in the morning. But the reports that we had received from members was that the congestion at the boat ramp occurred later in the day. So there was discussion as to adding 2 additional data points, midday and mid to early afternoon, to the data collection. But the advisory committee is having difficulty finding enough volunteers to be able to collect that data. The data sheet that I provided expands the number of days as well as provides these 3 data points. The number of day expansion is definitely unrealistic based on the limited volunteers. If we limit it to just Saturday and Sunday only, there are 16 data collection days that would need to be serviced or addressed for the remaining of this season through the Labor Day weekend. And that means, and they're multiplied by 3, there are 72 time slots that need to be covered. So this is the challenge that we're going to have, is getting data that is useful and accurately reflects usage and congestion problems. So I'm not sure that this motion is really going to be able to go forward if we're not going to be able, if we can't reasonably expect implementation by the MAC.
Yeah, I think, and one of the reasons I think, Colette, you wanted to bring this up is to kind of bring this out into the public and sort of memorialize it in the sense that we, I always try to make sure we, leverage the use of our advisory committees. And in this case, we thought we had a very good approach to looking at an issue that's been discussed at length, over the years about the use of the boat ramp, or the non-Ocean Pines individuals that have access and the use of that boat ramp. And now that we sort of put something in more sort of concrete terms with regard to, let's get some data and understand exactly whether or not we have a problem. Now we, and everybody agreed. And now once we've decided to move forward, now the manpower in order to do that has been sort of the crutch, if you will. It's something that it's a very reasonable pushback from the Marine Advisory Committee. You don't want 3 or 4 people spending their entire weekend writing down license plates, doing whatever is required for data collection. So it's almost, maybe a call to arms for the rest of the community. If we can, band together and try to, come together and collect this data, so that we can make an informed decision on the use of the boat ramp going forward, I think we do that. But right now, we're kind of in a little bit of a quandary because, the issue is in front of us. We don't have the manpower to pull together the data collection that's needed, but nor do we want to make a decision that doesn't include some factual representation of the situation. So, I don't know that we can do anything else other than maybe try to post something on the website, try to solicit some kind of, campaign to get folks to help us out with that collection. So I'm open to any and all ideas. I think, Cheryl, you had your hand up first. Thank you.
Once again, this is an issue that was brought to us by people who in the community were facing difficulty in being able to utilize one of the amenities that we all help pay for because there was a belief that outsiders were taking up all of the spots. So while we can appreciate that the Marine Advisory Committee can't handle this by themselves, I do think that an appropriate thing to do at this point would be to table your motion to next week, to next board meeting, and put out that call to the community, in particular those members who feel that it's being abused, to volunteer to help out with the data collection so that we can decide once and for all if their belief is well-founded factually, and that we can make some decisions then as a board, how do we address that? So at this point, I do believe some members have raised the possibility that, well, we're doing this because we want to charge people. To the contrary, we're doing this because if anybody gets charged, it's somebody who doesn't belong here. So that's not the intention at all. The intention is that the amenities that we all pay for are available for us to use without outside people taking up all of the spaces. So I would ask that everybody that would be willing to help out with this, send an email, telephone call to the board, and let us know that you're available and that we can go forward with this. And if we have an appropriate response by the July, somebody's waving at me. Just let me finish my thought. By the July meeting, we will know whether or not we have sufficient number of volunteers to be able to go forward with this.
Thank you. Colette.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, this is not for the purpose of charging members for the use of this amenity. Secondly, I want to specify that this is data collection that involves counting vehicles, not recording license plates. Recording license plates is going to tell us nothing about whether we have outsiders or insiders using this. The issue is there a congestion problem, regardless of who these users are? If there is a congestion problem, then we'll need to go to the next step of figuring out, is that due to outsiders versus insiders, which is a separate question. So it's a simple task of counting how many trailers are parked in and around the amenity and how many are actually attempting to use the boat ramp. It's not rocket science.
Ted.
My opinion is delaying anything, you might as well not do it, because you've already blown the month of July completely gone, and we're already through the summer season then. Either the only way to do this correctly is to actually have Ocean Pines control it, do it, record whatever we need to do, however we would determine whether they're here or not, and get it done and finished in the next 16 Saturdays and Sundays, and direct the general manager to do it and track the costs separately. One of the things is at some point we got to get to the end of this. Every year we talk about how this stuff is being used. Let's find out what the truth is, figure out if we do need to either have a sticker or a gate or whatever, what that cost is going to be to the association members to do that, how big the problem is, and bring it to a close one way or the other. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to go down the same line time after time.
Colette.
I guess the question is whether the manpower and the costs would fit within the budget that we have to do something like that. If not, I would say that we need to maybe go back to the drawing board and revisit this for the next season, because I agree with Ted, delaying it a month is going to eliminate important data.
Slobodan.
Thanks. You know, I liked a lot of things that Ted said. To me, really, from a board perspective, speaking as an individual director, I see this as a board's decision whether we charge use of boat ramp for the public, not for the homeowners, but for the public. And if we do, just like what we've done with other amenities, we set the fee for non-homeowners, how much to pay, and then we let the management figure out logistically how that's going to work. We have non-homeowner fees for the pools, for beach club parking. You know, we do it for all of our amenities. We have fees for public use. We can do basically the same thing with a boat ramp. Establish a fee, if that's what the board wants to do, and then just figure out from association perspective, logistically, how do we figure it out? And that would be something for, the GM and the staff to come up with a system that would work.
Go ahead. I have a response, but go ahead.
I'm not at all in favor of spending money to have our staff have to perform this task. It wasn't budgeted, and if you wanted to do it right, there'd be a great deal of time involved in this, and there's a cost associated with that. This was brought to us by community members who are upset about this situation, and I'm asking that those same community members come forward, along with those who are on the advisory committee who are available, and between the group of those two, come up with a sufficient number of people who can do this monitoring and data collection. And I'm only saying postpone your motion, but in the meantime, if we get the right amount of people to come forward, they can start the data collection. And if we lose part of a month, or if we lose a whole month, I'd rather do some of it instead of not doing any of it, because people bring this to us and we're trying to address it. And so we're saying to the community now, if you're listening, or we will put out an email blast to this and a press release as well, we need people to come forward to help us solve this problem for you.
Yeah, let me echo that. And I think we're sort of on the same page with this. It's like, we know that this, whatever effort we put in is for the community, the people that use that boat ramp. I think I'll say it for the third time. This is not a way to try to find out how we can charge, homeowners for the amenity. Okay, that's not it at all. We just got to figure out, A, do we have a congestion problem? It sounds like we do. And B, how do we manage it? All right. Someone and I would agree, but we're already there. We already recognize the fact that we have to find out. If we went ahead and charged a non-user fee, that's fine. How do you identify those folks? That's what we're looking at right now. So at the idea of soliciting from the membership. I mean, this is a great opportunity. We went out to the advisory committee, as a process to say that, we need your help. They came back, rightfully so, and said, we don't have the manpower. Now it's time to reach out to the community. You want this done? Please help us out. Help us get through there. I'm not a fan, I would agree with Cheryl, I'm not a fan of budgeting, in order to get this done, when I think with the very least we should ask to see if we can get some help from the community. I'll entertain one more question or one more comment and we'll move forward.
There's nobody bigger that, and I said this during the budget thing, I didn't want to vote for anything to get it done, but I'd also like to get this done, because I think even if there is a congestion problem, then it becomes down to how much of it is outside traffic. And let's say 12 or 15% is. What's it going to cost you? What's the return on investment to do it? So my personal belief is get it over, get it done, but I'm good. If you want to go with volunteers, that's fine. I just don't think you're going to get usable data back doing it that way unless you specify how are you going to identify. If we have a congestion problem, we do. How do you identify how much of that is outside versus inside? And that's where the critical part comes.
Yeah, but I think if you go back to Colette's statement, all we're doing is counting cars at this point. Not license plates, anything like that, just counting cars, getting some raw data to start with.
Okay, and then when you get the raw data, okay, we've got a congestion problem. How do we know it isn't just 95% all our own people that are doing it? So then we got to go to the second phase of how do we, is that kind of what we're talking about?
Recall the conversation from not last meeting, but we didn't even know if we had a congestion problem. That was the first question that came up. Do we have a congestion problem in that area? Not do we charge outside people. That was the first question. So that's how we wanted to address it. Do we really have a congestion problem? And that all we want is the data that's associated with that. So I'd like to move forward. There's a motion on the floor.
I will go with Cheryl's suggestion that we put out a call to members. Let's see if we can get this done through volunteers. We can revisit it in the July meeting.
Are you rescinding your motion?
So I will rescind my
All right,
motion.
so please record it. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, vacancy for board position. Slobodan.
Thanks, Doug. I felt it's important that board basically puts this on the agenda just so that we're in compliance with our bylaws. So let me read from our bylaws, section 504.
Are you making a motion?
No,
Or just discussion?
Just
Very good,
discussion.
thank you.
Yeah. Paragraph B, in the event a vacancy occurs on the Board of Directors within 90 days prior to the annual meeting, which is where we are today, but before the ballots have been submitted, which is where we are today, for printing under Section 501(3), majority of the remaining directors may, and I underscore the word may, appoint a replacement to serve until the next annual meeting. So I wanted to have, a board discussion on the agenda as part of this formal meeting so that we can individually express how we want to handle the situation. We have a vacancy on the board, and the bylaws actually provide us with the opportunity to appoint a replacement or not appoint a replacement, given that we are only 6 weeks away from the elections. And so I just thought it would be good for the membership to see how we feel as a board on this particular issue, so they're not wondering what's going to happen over the next 6 weeks.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
All right, discussion?
My personal opinion is, being this close to the election with one more scheduled meeting, that we not fill it at this point, and that we just go ahead and let the new board get set. That's just my opinion as an individual director.
I'd also add that I'd prefer to have Director Herrick here as well, because I think I would not want to have a decision that wasn't had input by everyone. So while I think it's, there's a couple of ways to go, I certainly wanted Director Herrick to be involved in this conversation. Personally, you look at practicality, maybe the fact that there's one more meeting, maybe we had an understanding of what we wanted to accomplish in the July meeting based on, outcomes of this. I don't know. I'm sure boards have had vacancies in the past where it came close to the election time and they didn't fill the position. I can't say I have a strong feeling one way or the other. It also presupposes that someone would want to step in for a short period of time, so that you take that into consideration as well. Maybe we reach out to someone and they just go, well, I'm just, not really interested in doing it for a week or several weeks rather than that. I also think, and just to say publicly, I think it would be inappropriate if we asked some of the candidates that are currently running for board to step in, all right? I would not be in favor of that at all. And I think, obviously, logic is dictating. I see a lot of heads going like this, which I just think I wanted to state it publicly, that in case anybody was thinking in those terms, I would not be supportive of that. But I think we have to have another discussion, and we certainly need to share, and we will, share emails amongst ourselves as we kind of think through the process. So I think the idea of letting the public know that we're aware of the situation, we'll have a couple of back and forth discussion and include Director Herrick as well so that we can decide what we want to do. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I don't know if time is of the essence, but I think we at the very least should make a decision sooner rather than later.
Yeah, just to add my personal thoughts on this and why I wanted it on the agenda today. I mean, there's basically 5 of us. I share the views with you and Ted. Given the time that's left and that we only have one meeting, it would be pointless to appoint anybody. And I just wanted this, to be a public discussion so the community knows how the board feels. But I'm totally in favor of just letting the board continue to function as is with 6 of us, and let the time run out till the next election.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. Thanks for your input. Next item on the agenda: discussion for vacancy of treasurer.
Thanks, Doug. Looking for a language from. Okay, so I wanted this topic on the agenda, again, for similar reasons, to be in compliance with the bylaws. However, in the case of officer position, the board doesn't have a really luxury of discretion, but we are required to act. According to Article 6, Section 604, officers of the association, vacancies. A vacancy in any office shall be filled for the unexpired portion of the term by a person elected by the Board of Directors at the next regular meeting of the board or at the special meeting called for that purpose. Since the resignation took place 4 days ago and the special meeting has not been called for, I felt it's important that this be added on the agenda today because this is the next regular meeting and it should be taken on as a subject at this meeting.
Second for discussion?
Second.
Discussion.
I mean, we're required by the bylaws to do something. I kind of go back to what Doug said at his president's thing. We need to have a special meeting. Let's get Tom in. I'm also of the opinion that we have two experienced people as the assistant treasurers currently that are not employees. Steve's the third, but are not, with John Viola and Gene Ringsdorf. And you know, my personal preference is that one of them step up and do this going forward. And then also my personal preference is, you know, depending on the makeup of the board, if I'm even sitting here, is that we do look for expertise in the treasurer's position going forward. So I would say a special meeting when we've had a chance to talk to people.
Yeah, the other part, I would agree, and thank you for bringing it up, Sloan. I think the other part of it too is we haven't had a chance to solicit you know, from any potential candidates, all right, because it's been a quick turnaround. So I think the commitment in order to stay in compliance with the bylaws is to recognize publicly that we have the responsibility to hold a special meeting in order to address the election of a treasurer. From a practicality perspective, you know, we've got John Viola and Gene Ringsdorf, as Ted has mentioned, and we can at least run any specific, you know, treasurer requirements through them, and they're more than capable of taking care of that. Other discussion?
Yeah, let me try to simplify this for the sake of time. John Viola is now assistant treasurer. We have 6 weeks to go. I have asked John Viola if he would be willing to step up in the role of a treasurer for the remainder of the term, and he was perfectly okay with that. We got 5 directors here. It's a meeting that bylaws allow us and expect of us to basically vote. So I would like to basically nominate John Viola, and we cast a vote to approve his appointment as an officer, taking the position of the treasurer, and not really delay it to a special meeting. And we all are familiar with his skills. He's demonstrated his leadership, his knowledge on many occasions with software issues and everything. And to me, this is you know, one of those situations that it's absolutely a no-brainer on the part of the board. This should be probably the easiest vote we'll have ever made.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have that information prior to this meeting, and we would have you know, saved some time. So when were you aware that John Viola was willing to accept it?
I just called him 5 seconds before the meeting just to double check. That's why I was outside, you know, because it was something that I wanted to see if we can get done today.
Can you confirm that he has indeed will accept it if we?
I could call him right now again, but I called him and he said.
All right. Well, going on the notion that you know, John will accept, then I would certainly accept a motion to elect John Viola as the treasurer of the organization to fill the term that was vacated by Director Supik and her appointment as treasurer of the association. No, it has to be moved first. Is there a motion?
I move to appoint John Viola as a treasurer of the association until the next board organization meeting is scheduled, at which point in time new officers of the association will be appointed.
Is there a second? I want to make.
Yeah, I was second. Can we hang on for 1 second, because I'm texting with him right now,
All right.
so that I could get a second comment.
And I know this is getting into minutia, but Slobodan, according to the 603, it should say elected, not appointed. So if you restate your motion with elected, I think we'll be in compliance.
So, Michelle, strike
Strike the words
the word-
appointed and replace. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Was there a second? Ted seconded. Okay. I don't think we need any further discussion, just a confirmation.
I just called before the meeting. It's a very simple decision. He's already doing all the work.
Okay. I'm now going to close the floor for discussion, call the question. All those in favor of electing John Viola to fill in as the treasurer of the association through the term vacated by Director Subic, say aye.
He just said for only 6 weeks.
Yeah, this 6 weeks. Right. Well, we've got to move. I think we get, matter of fact, let's just, I'm all for this, and if we have to make any adjustments later, we certainly can. All right? So all those in favor, aye? Thank you. All right, I'm going to add an item to new business. I'd like to make a motion that we, board adjourn to a closed session for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to employees and personnel, specifically pertaining to director actions related to the recent resignation of Director Supic, as permitted by the Maryland Homeowners Association Act, Section 11B, 111, subsection 4I.
Mr. President, excuse me. You have one appointment to make before you do that.
We have to do it at the end of new business. Then we will make an
I
appointment.
apologize.
Okay. I move that we adjourn to closed session for the purposes of discussing the matters pertaining to employees and personnel, specifically pertaining to director actions related to the recent resignation of Director Supic, as permitted by the Maryland Homeowners Association Act, Section 11B-111, subsection 4I.
Wait a second.
Is there a second?
Is anybody seconding this motion?
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Discussion.
I will publicly state that I have never been made aware of this in advance of this meeting. And I would like to ask this board that no closed session discussion occurs on this subject, but that the board stays in the open session and discusses publicly whatever they would like to discuss related to this topic.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn to closed session. Is there a second? Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for discussion. Call the question. All those in favor of adjourning to closed session after this meeting?
Before you do, I have a final comment to make.
I
If
just
you
adjusted
go into a closed session, if you
Excuse
go
me?
into a closed session, I will not take part in that meeting.
That's very good. Then you don't have to. That's your prerogative. Motion on the floor as stated. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Slobodan, you're out of order. Next item on the agenda, appointments. Lawrence Malone, second term ARC. All those in favor of accepting Lawrence Malone for his second term on ARC? Any discussion? All those in favor? Seeing that we finished the agenda, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right. Thank you.